Laura, last time we began a discussion of diagnosing challenging behavior.
We talked about medical and environmental factors that contribute to challenging behavior.
Right.
I learned to first look for a medical cause of the behavior. If there isn't a medical cause, I learned to use data to determine the influence of the environment on behavior.
When a challenging behavior can't be diagnosed in terms of a medical cause or in terms of environmental factors, we look at the functions of the behavior.
Functions? Are you talking about the purpose of the behavior?
Yes, I am. When looking at the functions of a challenging behavior, we're asking, what's the purpose? What motivates the behavior?
I get it.
Some behavior has a direct purpose. Throwing yourself from a wheelchair you've been in for 8 hours gets you some relief.
Or scratching relieves the itch.
Right. Other behavior functions indirectly.
What do you mean?
Well, headbanging may function to get someone to come over and provide assistance to the bathroom.
So the purpose of the headbanging is to get to the bathroom?
Indirectly, because someone has to assist.
The headbanging is a way of communicating a need.
That's right. And challenging behavior may be a form of communication.
So by looking at the functions of a challenging behavior, we're trying to understand the behavior from the individual's perspective.
Yes. And once you've made your diagnosis, you'll find that effective treatments range from changing the environment, which we discussed last time, to teaching new ways to communicate needs.
But where do we start?
We start with 4 typical functions of challenging behavior: sensory stimulation, escape, attention-seeking, and personal gain.
You'll explain those, right?
Right. I'll explain each function. I'll also share some behavioral indicators for each function that will help guide you toward a diagnosis.
What about treatment?
We'll discuss treatment alternatives as well.
Let's get started.
All right. One possible function for a challenging behavior is to produce sensory stimulation.
Sensory stimulation? I'm not sure what that means.
Many behaviors seem to be almost meaningless. Stereotyped movements
Like rocking.
and mild self-injury don't seem to serve any useful purpose. But we often find that these behaviors are done for the sensory stimulation they produce.
Why?
Well, when an individual is understimulated,
Bored.
yes, challenging behavior like finger flicking or putting hands in mouth is done to liven things up.
To relieve the boredom. So how do I diagnose whether a behavior is done for sensory stimulation?
You look for indicators that the person really seems to enjoy performing the behavior.
Because of the sensory stimulation it produces?
Mm-hmm. Another indicator is that the behavior occurs continuously when you're not around.
Why is that?
Because when a behavior functions to increase sensory stimulation, the individual is just as likely to do it when you're not there as when you are there. And behavior that fills a sensory need doesn't just happen once or twice and then it's over.
It goes on and on.
Yes. Another indicator of sensory stimulation is that the behavior occurs repeatedly in the same rhythmic way.
Like rocking. There's not much variation in the movement.
Exactly. The last indicator of behavior that functions as sensory stimulation is that the person seems unaware of anything else going on.
I've seen individuals completely caught up in the behavior.
When the function of the behavior is to increase sensory stimulation, the individual may seem to be totally absorbed by it.
Knowing that it functions to increase sensory stimulation, how do we treat the challenging behavior? By interrupting it?
By itself, interruption isn't very effective. More effective treatments are aimed at altering the environment or providing substitutes for the challenging behavior.
How do you mean?
Make the environment more stimulating.
You mean help the individual find more interesting things to do?
Yes. You can even look for things that may produce a similar kind of stimulation.
Like rocking in a rocking chair?
Precisely.
I see how knowing the function of the behavior leads to treatment options.
Another possible function of a challenging behavior is to escape.
You mean the challenging behavior is aimed at getting away from something?
Or someone. The purpose of many different forms of challenging behavior, from aggression to self-injury, is to escape an unpleasant situation.
You mean like tipping over a table to get out of a task a person doesn't want to do?
It's a cycle where the individual acts up, escapes from the task, and then acts up again when they want to escape again.
So what indicates that the function of the behavior is to escape?
Well, when the behavior frequently happens after an instruction to do something, especially a difficult task, that indicates escape.
So the person becomes challenging to get out of the task.
Definitely. If you tell an individual that it's time for work and they start becoming aggressive,
That's a good indicator that the aggression is escape motivated.
yes. Another indicator of escape is that the challenging behavior stops just after you stop making demands on the individual.
You mean like when we stop working, the challenging behavior stops?
Good example.
I've seen that happen.
When the individual seems to be doing the challenging behavior to purposely upset or annoy you, that can indicate escape.
You mean like when an individual
bathroom
keeps
again?
leaving to go to the bathroom?
That can be very annoying, but do you see how the behavior may function to get the individual out of doing the task?
Sure. Going to the bathroom is an escape.
Let's look at some treatments for escape behavior. The first is environmental. Analyze what's difficult or unacceptable about the task and change it.
Like,
If the person doesn't like doing the work because it gets her hands dirty, see if wearing gloves would be an acceptable alternative.
but isn't that giving in? Won't the person become challenging when they want to escape from another situation?
Good point. That's why we try to teach more acceptable forms of communication.
Can you give me an example?
Let's say a person becomes challenging to get a break from what they're doing. Teach other ways to communicate, "I want a break."
By asking or signing?
Yes. And start by offering lots of chances to communicate and to take breaks when the individual asks appropriately.
So the individual gets lots of practice to communicate and be reinforced with a break. Well, what if the individual starts to escape by becoming challenging?
Well, there are usually warning signs that the individual is becoming uncomfortable. As soon as you see those signs, prompt the appropriate way of requesting a break and then take a break.
I see.
Now, a third function of challenging behavior is attention seeking.
You mean when an individual becomes challenging to get the attention of others?
Sure. Attention seeking often happens when attention from others is scarce.
That can get pretty busy.
The first indicator that the behavior functions to gain attention is pretty obvious. The results of the behavior cause someone to have to spend time with the individual.
I may have to go over and help straighten up a mess.
Or you may have to referee when one person strikes out against another.
I get it.
Another indicator of attention seeking is that the challenging behavior occurs just after you shift your attention away from the individual.
Like when I start talking to others, the individual starts hitting herself.
Or the challenging behavior occurs when you have to go do something else.
Like answer the phone.
A final indicator is that the challenging behavior occurs to upset or annoy you when you aren't paying attention to the individual.
So the annoying behavior is actually aimed at getting my attention.
Absolutely. Some people seem to intuitively know what it takes to break your concentration or get your attention.
What are the treatments for challenging behavior when the function is to gain attention?
Starting with the environment, rearrange things so the individual doesn't have to become challenging to get your attention.
Like sitting next to the individual instead of in another room.
Or doing an activity together instead of separately.
I see. That way the individual gets attention and I get to keep working on the task at hand.
Other treatments are aimed at improving communication skills.
Communicating the need for attention?
Exactly. You could teach the individual to say or signal, "Pay attention to me," or "How am I doing?" or "I need help."
Should the person learn to use sentences?
Not necessarily. The words and signs don't have to be sophisticated. Gestures will do, as long as they're clear. And make sure everyone understands the meaning.
So the individual doesn't have to challenge. I understand.
The last function of challenging behavior is personal gain.
Let me try this one. That's when the challenging behavior is done to get something more than attention?
Right, it's done to get something tangible in the environment, or from people in the environment.
Like getting someone to take you out of your wheelchair, or getting money, or getting food.
Definitely.
So what indicates that the behavior is for personal gain?
The first indicator is that the challenging behavior gets something concrete. I found that right after Sandra hit herself, someone would come over and offer her ice cream and clothing. When Sandra got what she wanted, she'd stop hitting herself.
Oh, I see. That's pretty clear.
Another indicator is that the challenging behavior occurs soon after a reinforcer has been denied or removed.
So the challenging behavior may be an expression of anger because something was taken away.
You'll see challenging behavior that functions for personal gain when a privilege has been denied or a promise has been broken.
Dan was promised that a coffee cup with his initials would come in the mail by a certain day, The day of the deadline, the cup didn't come in, and nothing seemed to calm Dan down.
Another indicator is that the behavior stops when the item is returned or the privilege is granted.
For Dan, when the coffee cup did arrive, he became his regular self.
That's personal gain for you.
So what are the treatments?
First off is to alter the environment and provide easy access to materials and activities that the individual wants or needs.
So if a person takes someone else's food, find a way to make food more available.
Precisely. In terms of communication, you can teach the individual to sign or say what they want.
How is that done?
Start out by giving the individual lots of opportunities to practice the request and get what they want.
I see.
When the individual starts becoming challenging, prompt the appropriate request, and always follow up requests by giving the person exactly what they want.
Did that work with Sandra?
Yes, it did. We taught Sandra to sign for ice cream and articles of clothing instead of hitting herself.
That's great.
The point of the functional approach is that situations can be analyzed to find out the purpose of the challenging behavior.
Okay. The purposes of challenging behavior are sensory stimulation, escape, attention seeking, and personal gain.
It's easy to be misled, to think that just knowing the behavior is enough to come up with an effective treatment.
What do you mean?
I mean that knowing an individual is aggressive or self-injurious doesn't tell us anything about the reason why, and pulling a treatment out of a bag of tricks probably won't work.
So just knowing that a person slaps her face isn't enough.
You have to look at the bigger picture.
At the function, the purpose of the behavior.
And an individual may use the same behavior at different times for different purposes. Sandra was not only self-injurious for personal gain.
To get ice cream and clothing.
Sandra used the same behavior to escape from tasks.
I see. That makes the behavior a little harder to diagnose.
And that's why a functional assessment of challenging behavior, like we've discussed here, is absolutely necessary to determine the actual causes of the behavior.
Thanks, Greg.
You're welcome, Laura.